Yeah, sit there. Sit here.
Wonderful. So I am going to do some really just quick questions. John, could you please give us an introduction of yourself? Let me fix that because I messed up your microphone.
So, I'm John Hiatt. I've lived here for 50 years this year, and I've been interested in the outdoors and Mount Charleston. Part of the reason I moved here was because of Mount Charleston. When I interviewed for a job, we went up there and I thought, God, this is really a neat place. It's all public land, it's available, and that's one of the reasons that my wife and I moved here. So I'm a chemist by training, but I have a tremendous interest in the outdoors, and I've been involved in water issues for a long time. I served on the Las Vegas Valley Groundwater Advisory Committee since its inception. So I've learned a lot over the years about water, and about Mount Charleston, and about how our place works here. And I've seen tremendous change since I moved here, when there were about 300,000 people living in the valley, and there are now over 2 million. So.
Wow, I know, big changes. We're glad to have you here, John. Thank you so much for joining us. We also have Gregory Anderson Sr. joining us here. Gregory, tell us a little bit about yourself.
My name is Greg Anderson. I'm a Southern Paiute from the Mojave Indian Reservation, tribal member. Born and raised. I was born here in Las Vegas at Southern Nevada Memorial in 1961. I seen this place grow, and now I live in Mojave, where I live to this day. We moved out of Las Vegas, and when I was in I guess, I don't know, 8 years old. I don't know what grade I was in, but I was in 8th grade. My dad worked here in Las Vegas. My dad also belonged on the Equal Rights Commission in Las Vegas. He worked for Go Branson Neon Sign Company, which is now Yesco. My dad built a lot of signs here in Las Vegas. The Welcome to Las Vegas sign, Howdy Partner, Howdy Doody, the Cowboy Downtown, the Golden Gate, Silver Slipper, all these places. But I seen how the places changed, so that's just me. And that's me as being David. I see all the stuff happening in Las Vegas today that I'm not a fan of, but you know what I mean? It's here.
Welcome,
Thank you.
Gregory. We're happy to have you with us.
Thank you.
And then I also am going to introduce Wayne Belcher, who is a federal government worker, but you're going to go ahead and expand on that for everybody.
Okay, I'm a hydrologist, hydrogeologist with the federal government, and I've been working here in Southern Nevada and internationally in Africa, the Middle East, and Central America for the last 30 years. So I haven't been here as long as these two folk, but I've been here long enough to see a lot of changes. I remember when I first moved out here, 215 didn't extend past Green Valley Parkway. So I've seen a lot of changes and stuff, but I'm passionate about water issues and how to find water resources and how to utilize them in an environmentally sensitive way, because that's mainly the work that I've done up until the last year internationally.
Wonderful.
So.
We are so glad to welcome all three of you. Today's Studio One was conceived from a conversation that I had with John Hiatt. He has a deep knowledge, and I'm hoping that all of you see how wonderful in depth he has of just, he knows everything. Any questions that you might have regarding what's going on with the environment around us? Water issues are massive, but also we all know Mount Charleston. We know the Spring Mountains. They're very familiar to us, but I'm hoping, and I know that this panel is going to be able to present to you a different side to all of it, so that now that you look at our natural resources, you'll understand it's a lot more than what meets the eye. So I present to you John Hiatt, Gregory Anderson.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So what I'd like to do tonight is just have a kind of a brief overview of what the situation is, find out about the water, find out what's going on, hear about the Native American perspective about what's happening, and then talk through various issues, and then towards the end of the hour, we'll open it up. We'll have question and answer and discussion, opinions, hear from everybody. So hopefully you will enjoy it. So basic thesis is that Mount Charleston is responsible for Las Vegas. Without Mount Charleston and its height, almost 12,000 feet, we would not have the water here that is the reason Las Vegas was built to start with. 1905, the railroad came through here. They needed water. Steam engines need water. Community needed water. And we had Big Spring, which is dry today, but it's over there on the Springs Preserve. You can see the site where it was. That put out about 4,000 gallons a minute of nice, clear, pure water. That was very attractive to the San Pedro, Los Angeles, and Salt Lake Railroad that came through here. And so they laid out a town, they built it, and sort of the rest is history there. But if the Spring Mountains were not nearly as high, we wouldn't have that water. And so I'd like Wayne Belcher to kind of explain to you, or to all of us, how water works, how we pull that water out of the atmosphere with high mountains, and how it gets down here to the valley, and how this valley is kind of unique in terms of its water. It's an artesian basin, and we'll hear just about what an artesian basin is. It was very obvious in 1905. It's not quite so obvious today. But Wayne,
Okay.
let's talk about it.
Well, the Spring Mountains are what we call the major recharge area for both the Las Vegas Valley and what I've been mainly working on, the Death Valley Regional Flow System. Most of that water is from precipitation, from mostly snow that accumulates, and then during the melting season, it seeps into this major limestone area that exists in eastern Nevada, parts of Utah, and New Mexico. Yes, New Mexico. And it seeps in through cracks, and because of the way that the Spring Mountains are divided, some of that goes over to Death Valley, and some of it comes into our valley here. And it creates, because of the height of the mountains, it creates what John referred to as artesian conditions, which means that there's pressure in the water that will cause it, when you drill a well, to rise above the top of this limestone aquifer. And so in the past, we had flowing artesian conditions where you could drill a well and you wouldn't have to put a pump and it would just flow out. But through more water use, that water table has decreased, that pressure has decreased. It's still artesian because it rises above, but it's below the ground surface now. So then you have to put a pump in it to pull it out. But that water can take, hundreds to thousands of years to travel through these tiny cracks in the limestone aquifer as it comes off of the Spring Mountains and through the to the basin where we can use it. And if I recall, John, it's correct. I think it's correct to say that about 20% of our water that we use in the valley is from groundwater.
It's more like 10%.
Okay. So, and then the rest of it, obviously, we get from Lake Mead. I think that's all I have for now.
So, in 1905, water did flow out of the ground, actually spurted out of the ground as much as 20 feet high, column waters. It was very impressive, this artesian. And those days are gone, but it still comes above where you would encounter it in the ground if you were drilling a well, and that's what makes it artesian. And he talked a little bit about the Death Valley flow system, and one of the most amazing things I heard was some of the work done there to understand water flow under Yucca Mountain and towards Death Valley was they drilled a number of wells, but one of those wells was out in the Amargosa Valley at the foot of the Funeral Mountains near the Long Street Casino, if you're familiar with that. And they went down about 2,200 feet and they hit water, and the water came up to within 100 feet of the surface. Now, if you figure that, translate that 2,000 feet or so of rise and put that into pressure per square inch, it comes out to be about 900 pounds per square inch that water was on. That's how much water that pressure was under, because it was under what's called a confining layer geological layer of presumably limestone, but it could be something else conceivably. And when that was punctured, then water spurted up. Didn't come to the surface, so nobody saw it, but they measured it. And to me, that's truly impressive. And that's the kind of thing that happens with water, groundwater. Groundwater's amazing because it's invisible. And so we exploit it. We don't worry about it. Hey, we drill a well, water comes out of the tap, no problem, because we can't see it. It's all hidden from us. And so the damage that sometimes we're doing to groundwater is not obvious, but it's happening. And we will all find out later about that.
Yeah, one of the, you guys get home and get your, on your computers, UN Water, United Nations Water put out a publication in 2022 called Groundwater, Making the Invisible Visible. And it's a fantastic report. And it's really has a lot of good information on groundwater and how it's used and abused all over the world.
And while we think we have a problem with the Colorado River and groundwater here, this problem is not only nationwide, it's worldwide. One of the biggest aquifers in the United States is the Oglala Aquifer in Nebraska and Kansas and the Middle West, and that's being pumped like crazy to grow crops. You know, instead of dry land farming in Nebraska that they did 50 years ago, now everybody's irrigating. It's great, and the water table's falling, and it's only a question of time until you get to the point where the cost of pumping exceeds the value of the water, and then it's over. We don't have that here because we don't have a lot of agriculture here, but water is valuable here. And one of the things that most people don't know about our water situation here is that in the late 80s, well, I'll back up a little bit. This valley subsisted entirely on groundwater up until 1972.
Wow.
There was no Colorado River water prior to that for general use in the valley. There was a pipeline constructed during the war that brought water to the basic industrial complex in Henderson, but all the rest of the valley subsisted entirely on groundwater. 1972, we brought in Colorado River water at that point in time. Since then, of course, we've grown dramatically, but the water table was falling in 1972. People were, and before that, and people were concerned. In the late 80s, water table here was falling about 3 feet a year. People were concerned. And so a couple of guys that lived in the Northwest Valley and were in charge of a quasi-municipal system, a small water system for their community. They went to Pat Mulroy, who was head of the Water Authority, and they complained, and she said, okay, well, we need to talk about it. She actually formed a groundwater advisory committee at that point, and there was a lot of discussion about what to do and whatnot, and finally, in about 1996, they came up with a plan, and that is, we'll take Colorado River water and we'll recharge this aquifer. And we will say that we're banking the water. So the Water Authority owns most of that water. Some of it's permanent recharge, but the vast majority of it is not recharge. It is available for use. They recharge 365,000 acre feet, which is substantially more than Nevada's yearly allotment from the Colorado River. Water table came up. No surprise. Nobody talks about what's happening in the valley, but pumping hasn't changed over the last 40 years, pretty much the same. And so at some point in the future, we will all again have falling water table here, which nobody knows. Nobody worries about, but it is a big deal. So at this point, I'd like to have Greg tell us a little bit about the prehistory of this valley before Europeans arrived, and we'll talk about more recent history, because his people have been here for hundreds, if not thousands of years.
Do you want to talk about the Mount Charleston or just the water here?
Talk about Mount Charleston, your people, and their interactions
Okay.
with the
Well,
whole community of Southern Nevada.
Mount Charleston is one of our sacred areas. It's a place where we gathered. It's a place where we worshipped. we have songs that we sing to this day is our salt songs. And there's a lot of trails that go up through the Mount Charleston, and one of the trails that goes up to one of the caves is that a lot of people are going there, but we have a lot of disrespect with people traveling those trails, going up there, graffiti writing, and all these things that are happening. Those are the things that we're kind of stepping back away from because it's just causing a bunch of problem. And it's one of the things I see is that all these water sources in Las Vegas, when I was growing up, the meadows right here at the Spring Preserve, I remember going there as a kid and my mother and father, them playing cards or playing a little gambling game, what the old people used to do. And that, at that time, I think it was Helen J. Stewart at that time owned that area right there. But there used to be another little spring that ran off of Bonanza and went down to the Las Vegas Indian tribe, the colony there, ran down off of the desert. Used to be a Smart and Final used to be down Main Street, and across the street used to be a place called Vegas Village. And that water used to go right into the ground right there. And so there's other springs out here in Von Tobel was a spring. Out on Craig Road was another gathering place. We used to go to the one out in Von Tobel. We used to go out and pick spinach, Indian spinach. It's called tamud. And that's where it is right today. Right now is the springtime is when they go pick that. And I don't know what they call it, but in our language we call it a tamud. You know, it's an Indian spinach. But we used to gather that right there all the way up to Salone Canyon. So those other places, Tule Springs, and I don't know, there's another ranch used to be up there above Tule Springs, Floyd Land Park, and I don't know, was it Geyser Ranch?
No, Gilchrist.
Gilchrist Ranch, yeah. And my grandma lived there in Gilchrist Ranch, so, you know, and they all worked on the farm right there. But all these places, I mean, there's so many water areas to this day, you know, and I was just explaining and talking to these guys about a lot of stuff, the way I understand, the way I feel about it, you know, and how I look at what we're doing to this country or to our land is we're just taking, and nothing giving back, you know, and the Almighty Creator, He's the one that's punishing us today because that's what we're doing. We put so many holes in Mother Earth, and look what's happening. We're all drinking recycled water here in Las Vegas, and we're drinking recycled water. We're not drinking real water. I mean, your toilet water, I guess that's what you could say you're drinking. That's how I look at it. You know what I mean? And we got a river that runs through our reservation in Mojave. I mean, that's good water. I mean, but the water's warm. The well here, right here in Meadows, that was cold. That was an artesian well. Our water's warm. That's why I was just going to ask the question when you're saying the water going towards the Pahrump Valley on that side, was that warm water or is that cold water? That's why I'm saying I was trying to understand the basins, how they're saying these basins are, where these waters are. You got cold water or is it warm water?
Well, some of the water...
or just water, we're saying.
One of the things that I was surprised at when I first moved here was how much water there is in the desert, especially working over on the Death Valley side, because a lot of that water infiltrating and being recharged on the Spring Mountains goes very, very deep and starts traveling, and then it hits a fault and goes up and discharges at the surface. And because it's gone deep, the earth will warm it up. And then so that's why you have these wonderful thermal springs out at Ash Meadows and in Death Valley. I mean, the salt pan is a major discharge area for groundwater, and that's why all the salt is there. Even though, surprisingly, if you dig down just a little bit in the salt pan, it's moist. And it's because there's a lot of water. It's just being evaporated away so quickly that it's leaving behind the salt. But it's the same thing here, why we have all these dry playas and stuff and wet playas here on this side and on the other side of the Spring Mountains. You have a lot of water that's being recharged on the Spring Mountains, comes down through the limestone aquifer, goes deep, and then is just discharged up. But some of that, because we have, relatively shallow, well, it's not relatively shallow. Well, I guess it is. Limestone, some of that can be cold and or cooler. And one of the reasons that the Spring Mountains are called the Spring Mountains is because this water that's infiltrating, some of that coming down hits like the Chinle Formation, which is, and the Moenkopi, which are finer grained sediments. And so the water is forced out as springs. And so that's why we call the Spring Mountains the Spring Mountains. So anyway.
Back where I was at, it's just about the valley is, the valley it was beautiful back in the day growing up here. There was, I guess it was only, they used to call it Tonopah Highway. And that was, what is this?
W95.
Yeah, it used to go right through, they used to call it Tonopah Highway. Rancho, is it Rancho now?
Yeah, Rancho Drive.
Rancho, back in the day. And there was nothing on the other side. Craig Road was a Craig Road. And the only thing there was the ranch house, steakhouse was only in the golf course. That was the only two things on that road, on Craig Road, when I was growing up. But I remember the whole valley going all the way down, and there was no Lake Las Vegas. You know what I mean? There was no Lake Las Vegas. There was this creek that ran through there. And then we used to gather willows, and my mom and them used to gather willows. Used to go down to get wolfberries. Wolfberries used to be down there, the spinach, all the different foods that we ate, the wild onions, all that stuff. But you can't even go into these places now because it's all fenced off. And I haven't never seen any of the vegetation that we used to get out here, and then I see the spring preserve is trying to grow some of the native plants, but I never see them in the valley anymore. Green Valley used to be one of the places that we used to go gather all the time, and in the mountain sheep and all that stuff over there. Those are the things that mean to the people, is the mountain sheep, the deer, and all these things. And back in the 1800s, when they took all of our land, Las Vegas used to belong to us at one time. 2.3 million acres of Clark County in Arizona and Utah used to belong to our tribe at one time. The government came in and put us back on the reservation at 1,000 acres. And then in 1984, they gave us 77,000 acres. So that's what I always talk about it, is that they put us in a desolate area expecting us not to prosper. But now that we're starting to prosper, now everything else is starting to happen to us. But, those are the things that we've been fighting for forever. We've been pushed and pushed underneath the carpet, but we're never heard. And that's why I talk about the Creator is punishing all of us for what's happening today. And that's why I look at it. All these areas that I've been in my whole life. I mean, I've been to Mount Charleston, where I guess it's their center where they have that out right there. Right below that used to be a dump. Right below it used to be a dump. Used to be wild horses over there all the time. We used to go up there all the time and see all the stuff. And they have another thing we used up there is cliff rose. The cliff rose, we used that cliff rose to make us grass skirts for the ladies and other shoes and stuff, different things we use the cliff rose for. But, we also ate some of the blossoms, like a lot of the stuff in the town we eat. You guys probably ate them, or you're not, but I don't even know what they call that, but I just know it's a little orange flower that grows on the desert on the side of the road. You see it all the time. But those are very edible. They're edible and they're very good to eat. So,
Greg, could you tell us a little bit about the relationship between the various tribes that occupied this area? Southern Paiutes, the Chemehuevi, and any others that you're aware
The Shoshone tribes to the north on the other side of Indian Springs, and then the Chemehuevis are down below. Salone Canyon was Chimiwave territory, and that part, our territory went all the way, and then the southern Paiutes go clear up into Utah. So, but the Mojave Band of Paiutes and Las Vegas Band of Paiutes, they're here. At one time, we were one. And when the government couldn't take care of us, and everybody went back to their areas. That area over there, Mojave, then you have Las Vegas. But all the people here are closely related. Mojave and Las Vegas are very closely related. My mom's from Las Vegas, my dad's from Mojave, and then we got her mom's from out in Pahrump area, so, you know, we're all closely related with the Shoshones and the Paiutes.
So can you tell us a little bit about how the native peoples here move seasonally from the valley to higher elevation and back, and how that worked?
Yeah, a lot of times we traveled like that. That's how we've traveled with the seasons, you know, with the food sources, and that's how we traveled. You know, we traveled the mountains to pick the pine nuts and to harvest the other things, the deer and all those things. But down in the valleys was the rabbits and the vegetables, the greens. In the summertime and the springtime is when we come down here to the valleys. But we are all over, you know, all over the place. There's so many camps here in Las Vegas, all on the Sunrise Mountain area. That area is over there is very important to us. There's Sacred Cave out there. It's called Gypsum Cave. You guys probably ran out there, but that place has got the same thing. We're having, with BLM, you have to work all through these things that they're doing the same thing. They're graffiti all over that place, you know, and they're building power lines across that. And that is a very sacred area where considered to the tribes, is because that's where you went to earn your powers, your medicines. That's where you got that. That cave is very sacred to us. His songs come out of that cave, and your power, your medicine came out of that cave. But when you have all these things that have happened to that cave, now they're putting a power line over it, and there's so many taverns underneath there. If you know about if you did history work on it, there's so many taverns underneath there, and that they're putting these power lines through here. They don't care, but we care because they're drilling into these sacred sites, and these are medicine sites. So when they're drilling into it, sticking that power out of that. All the things that they found in there, in that thing is, they have the desert sloth they found in there. They have all kinds of things they found in that place. There's so many, but the people the bodies that they found inside there, those were the people, the way our people say it, is they weren't worthy. That's why you went in there to seek something, but you never came out because you wasn't worthy. It wasn't here. It wasn't here. So those are the things that we see. Mount Charleston is the same thing. There's a place up there, and that's where, as we say, we go to the happy hunting ground or whatever. That's where we cross over to the other side, is in Mount Charleston. So our first year, our spirit was stay here and travel wherever we traveled before. And then the next year we'll sing our songs. And I'm one of our singers for our tribe, and we sing our salt song called the salt song, and we sing these spirits back to where they have to be. And that's why I say Mount Charleston is very, very sacred to our people. There's a lot of things found in Mount Charleston that I don't think people very know about. The prayer plates that were found over by Lee Canyon, coming from the Spring Mountains where the prison is, coming across there. There were some prayer plates found. But today, all people, I would say, don't really respect those places because we're just building a building. So I can go on and on, but
So one thing that people notice, like driving over Highway 160, Mountain Springs Summit, you see these big old agave roasting pits. Were those used by your people, and can you?
I was pioneers probably. I thinking
Pardon?
pioneers probably. I never seen any roasting pits. Our pits are underground. They're dug in the ground, and that's a lot of the pits that we see. They're even roasting agave, or they're roasting pine nuts, or they're firing rocks. The Paiute people are known for bows and arrowheads. And we didn't have Eucidium, so we fired rocks. And we fired the rocks, and we made our arrowheads out of that. And the bows we use were mount sheep bows, the horns off the mount sheep. Those are the bows we used. And the arrows were arrow weeds or reeds. So those are the things. That's why the water means a lot to us. There's so much there. And we had the duck decoys that we made out of the tules. Those things and tules also was something we ate. The bottom parts, we ate those. But these are all the things that we're not really paying attention to as people. We should be paying attention to these things. That's why I say we're all being punished because the Creator is telling us these things, that what we're doing to Mother Earth to this day.
Thank you. So, heard a little bit about ancient history prior to Europeans arriving here. So let's talk a little bit about what happened when Europeans showed up here. The first real Europeans to come here were part of the Armijo group on the Old Spanish Trail, 1829. And it's called the Old Spanish Trail, probably a misnomer because Spain was gone by then. The Mexican independence took place in 1821, so it was really Mexicans coming from Santa Fe. And they were going to Southern California to trade. And one of the things that was true then, and is still true today, there are not very many places to get across the Colorado River. You know, you can cross it right out here by Hoover Dam. Going upstream, you got to go to Navajo Bridge up by Glen Canyon, 200 and some miles away. You want to go downstream, you got, 90 miles or something to go to Laughlin to cross the river, and then a few more south. So that problem has been there forever. So the crossing that was used then was called the Crossing of the Fathers way up in Utah. And that was discovered in the 1700s and not really used. Those people that discovered it never went much further. But Armijo did, and he came down through here. As far as we know, they probably were following the river, and they came up Las Vegas Wash, Las Vegas Wash, and came up, and they came up to the top of, or one of the men came up to the top of what's Whitney Mesa, and he could see the whole Las Vegas Valley, and it was green. And that's why he called it Las Vegas, the Meadows. And that was because of all of the groundwater here, supported a lot of trees, mostly mesquite, mostly screwbean mesquite actually, and grasses of various sort. And then they went up through what is area Blue Diamond and Wheeler Camp Springs right there, and then over Mountain Springs Summit, and then on. And the Old Spanish Trail was not a trail over most of its length. It was a route, a place from one spring to another, and you could take whatever route you wanted between point A and point B, because it was pretty much, it's all open country. Open, there's not many plants here. You could ride a horse any place. And that was mule trains they used, and probably as many as 100 mules. And they were taking woven goods from Santa Fe, New Mexico to Southern California to sell. And then they were buying horses and mules there, or stealing them, either way, and taking them back and selling them. And the mules they got in California were they're pretty valuable, and a lot of those were traded as far as Missouri, over the Santa Fe Trail, from Santa Fe all the way to Missouri. Everybody's heard about famous Missouri mules. Well, a lot of those came from California, actually. And then in the 1840s, starting in about 1846, 47, the Mormons had moved to Salt Lake, and they were looking for ways to get people from Europe. They were proselytizing in Europe and getting recruits to Utah. And it was a lot faster and easier to sail to Panama, walk across the isthmus, sail up to Los Angeles, and then go east to southern Utah, than to come from Europe and walk all the way across the plains from the Missouri River to Salt Lake. So that was used until the building of the transcontinental railroads, and then the Old Spanish Trail essentially became obsolete. So probably most people have been to Southern California over Cajon Pass, I-15, and about halfway down Cajon Pass, you come to these areas be on your right if you're going south, big sandstone rocks. big rocks. It's pretty impressive. That's called Mormon rocks, because the Mormons were the first ones to build a road through Cajon Pass, which is sort of one of those historic tidbits that people don't think much about.
I thought you were going to say Vasquez rocks, and I was going to make a Star Trek reference, but I don't need to.
I've not seen those. The Mormons came here in 1855 and set up shop, but they were only here for 3 years, and then in 1857 they went home because they were afraid the U.S. government and the Mormons were going to be at a war, and so they were called back to Utah to be ready to fight. Never happened, but so they were here for a while. Then we had ranching here, and then 1905 the railroad came. The San Pedro, Los Angeles, and Salt Lake Railroad with William Clark, for whom Clark County is named. He made his money mining copper in Butte, Montana, had a lot of money, and started the railroad here and laid out the town and sold lots. At the same time, there was a competing man, Mr. McWilliams, who laid out his version of the town on what became the other side of the tracks. But Clark and company would never share any of their water, so McWilliams didn't have water, and that part of town became the west side, and because it was deprived of water originally, it was poor, and it sort of got the short end of the stick ever since. Even till today, the west side is considered one of the poorer parts of the valley. So what's happened here historically, we still live with today.
Can I say something about that?
Sure.
I want to say that's your story. But the thing about it is, the Mormons came, it's just like the Europeans came, we were already established here. All these water sites were already established when we were here. And the Mormons came, exactly what you're saying, the Spanish came or whatever. They're the ones that took all these water sites that we had already established. And like they say, they were saying that we're the ones that taught those people how to garden, how to farm. You know, that's why I look at it. We were the first people here. So that's how I see it. It's not the Europeans or whoever was here. It was us native people that were here and established all of this. Because we didn't have the power to overrun what they were doing. We didn't have the guns like they had to take and kill our people and to put our people in slaves and stuff like that and take our children. So that's how I see it in the way I was told about our people here. You know, we could say all the stories we want to say, but from the old people we say, our old prophecies tell the whole stories. And that was before our times. And those are what we go off of. But, you know what I mean? You can say all the stuff about the pioneers or whoever, but I don't see it like that myself. That's just me.
What you just brought up is something that's really important, and that is what I call the "we were here first" problem. Yeah. And we see this all over the world. And we're living that right now with the arguments about water on the Colorado River, in which the Imperial Irrigation District says, we were here first. We have the senior rights on the river. Therefore, why are we even having this discussion about sharing water? We were here first. But the we were here first system only works if you have the power to enforce it. If you don't have the power to enforce it, being here first doesn't really buy you that much. And that's what happened to Native people all over the New World.
Yeah.
In fact,
and the Old World.
Different ones in the Old World,
yeah.
But yes, same thing.
British
worldwide phenomenon.
Yeah, the British did the same thing to people that lived in Kenya.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm sorry to say I said I was just it just keeps it comes to me all the time like that, and I just hate people saying that because we were here. Las Vegas was ours at one time, you know, and that's how I look at it. That's why I say all the surrounding here in this valley right here, we don't even talk about it. We're not even talked about. We're the last ones to know what happens to our water. We're the last ones to know about our land. I said all these waters were here when we were here. Like I said, they're putting a water line going out to Apex, right? Never consulted with the tribes, so, but they did that. That's Southern Nevada or Las Vegas Water District. Those people, that's how they operate. And it's about this. It ain't about what you really want to do. You know what I mean? It's all about this. Look at the growth here in Las Vegas. Look how big it's getting. What are we going to do? We're in a drought, but we're still building. And we're drinking our toilet water, and we're living. You know what I mean? That's how I see it. And we keep on building. We're going over so many archaeologist sites up in Red Rock. So many on the east side that we're just destroying. Because why? We got money, and we're going to build our Las Vegas to be bigger. We can't even support what we have.
So let's get back to Mount Charleston a little bit. So when the railroad came and people started living here, they needed timber, they needed the building materials, and so where did they look? They looked to the Spring Mountains. And some of the remnants of that work you can still see today up there. So if you're familiar with Cold Creek, if you go up above Cold Creek a little bit, there's a big water tank on the hill there you can see. And if you go off to the south of that, there's the remains of a sawmill there. A huge boiler and all of the stuff that went with that. How they got that there, I don't know, because they didn't have big trucks to haul it. It's truly amazing how big that equipment is that's still sitting there that was used early in the 20th century to saw logs and make timber. And Mr. McWilliams was one of the people, or the main person doing that, to provide lumber for building here in the Las Vegas Valley. So we exploited that. They did that at Coal Creek and also some in Lee Canyon. And we also did stuff in the Sheep Range. There's also a sawmill canyon on the east side of the Sheep Range where there was a sawmill. And if you go there today, or at least a few years ago, last time I was there, you can still see all the offcuts. Basically the outside of the log where it's half round and whatnot, where they cut it off to get rid of it. They just threw it in a pile. It's all still sitting there. There's an old truck up there with solid rubber tires. Until the late 30s, a lot of trucks had solid rubber tires. They didn't have pneumatic tires. And one of those trucks is still up there, up in that canyon.
What was the name of the canyon you said?
Sawmill Canyon.
Thank you.
Hence
We
the name.
weren't very imaginative when it came to names. So we have a sawmill there at Sawmill Canyon. There are grapevines there. It's Grapevine Canyon, Willow Canyon, Willow Creek, Cottonwood Creek. No, we're not very imaginative when it comes to names here. So we talked a little bit about water and whatnot. People have been worried about water for a long time and how to get it. Can you talk a little bit about Maxey and Aiken and what they did in terms of trying to understand how elevation and precip were related?
Yeah, one of the things some premier scientists back in the day, I can't remember their first names, but called Maxey and Aiken, they put out some seminal important work to establish how much precipitation became recharge in the groundwater. And it's basically knowing the concept, what we call the orographic effect, is the higher up you go in a mountain, the more precipitation you have. So they took that and assigned classifications of percentages of different altitudes, of saying, okay, if you've got, X number, X inches or feet in some cases of water at different elevation classes, that's the amount of water that's being recharged to the system. The rest of it is evaporated or melts and runs off as surface water. So a good rule, but later on in the process, with more scientific advancement, we modified their methodology, changed their classifications a little bit, but we've also used more sophisticated modeling the agency that I work for, which is how I will refer to them. It's not the CIA. And we've done more modeling and calibrated these models. There's some USGS scientists called Lori and Alan Flint and Joe Havesi. They have done a model called the Basin Characterization Model, and they've been able to calculate net infiltration of precipitation, which then becomes recharge in the groundwater system. And they use a lot of sophisticated modeling, looking at sun angles, the amount of precipitation, the type of rock type, a whole bunch of parameters that Maxey and Eakin didn't use. So there's more sophisticated methods, but the Maxey and Eakin method and the modifications of it still serve as a really good rule of thumb, so to speak, of how we can translate amount of precipitation into groundwater. In fact, a lot of my work internationally that I've done, we use like between 3 and 10% to estimate recharge, and that a lot of that are the same concepts that Maxey and Eakin did. So because a lot of times you just don't have any data at all. So
when you talk about recharge, is that rain or what's this recharge?
Recharge is a component of precipitation that it enters from as the, like, we'll just use the Spring Mountains, as the snow melts, a certain proportion of that enters into the groundwater system, and that's what we call recharge. So, and discharge is when the water will come out like at a spring. So.
Question in the back?
And we need all that science because the native peoples who were here for millions of years didn't have any of that and had plenty of water. So we need the science because we've sucked all the water out of the ground that we can and are trying to figure out how to use more of it.
Right, and there's a lot of indigenous knowledge that also needs to be applied because, as you've said, they've been here since time immemorial. Yeah.
I can say we go back to Mount Charleston. Mount Charleston is one of the areas we have, but if you notice Mount Charleston, it's bald on the very top, right? That's part of our stories that go back of the big flood. And why it's bald on top is because all the animals went to the very top and ate all the vegetation. So that's why it's bald up there, and that's because of the flood back in the days. That's in our stories that the tribal people talk about. That's why I said that mountain means more to us than anybody who wants to know. That's how I feel about that mountain. You know, our songs and stuff that come out of that mountain are very sacred songs, and we're losing all these things, but that place is something. We talk about the water. We can't go to places out there on the area, certain areas of the Sheep Mountain Range, all these areas that we're cut off to, unless you got a top security clearance. You can't go into these areas. But we have things that we find in these archaeology digs, like in Gypsum Cave, you got Pint Water Cave, those caves that have things that when we used to call on the water, and those rattles that we can never get and use because they come from those sacred areas that we can no longer go in those areas. So, you know what I mean? A lot of the water that we called upon at that time, we used to call that water and come bring it to us. You know, it would come. That's how we believed in that mountain. That's why that mountain is so sacred to us.
So you bring up the fact that top of Mount Charleston is bare, and that actually is significant. There's a concept that is sort of becoming current, I think, and that is something called effective precipitation. Like the only precipitation that really matters in terms of groundwater recharge is that which gets to the ground and can soak in. So depending upon the vegetation, not all that water gets to the ground. In fact, once you get past about 50% canopy cover with trees, as little as maybe in this climate, only a third of the water coming down actually gets to soak into the ground. The rest of it hangs up in the trees and just evaporates. And as it's getting warmer, and we have more solar radiation because of fewer clouds. We actually have more evaporation or sublimation of snow actually directly back into the atmosphere, and so that reduces the amount of recharge, and that affects not only us, we who would like the water, but it also affects the plant community because the plants depend upon that water totally, more than we do actually in some ways. And so the relationship between the amount of water we have and how much gets to the ground, how much soaks in, determines what we have in terms of vegetation. So we're seeing changes on Mount Charleston that we've not seen in centuries. So the Carpenter 1 fire that burned in 2013 started at high elevation, about something like 10,000 feet or so. And at the time, the Forest Service thought, you know, no big deal. It's only a few trees will burn. Then the weather changed and the wind came up. And we wound up with, 28,000 acres or so of fire burned. And we burned stuff that hadn't been burned in 1,000 years or more. All those big bristlecone pines up on the ridge between Griffith Peak and Mount Charleston, I mean, there were trees like that big around. And they all burned up. They're gone. They're not coming back anytime in the period any of us are going to be alive. Hopefully it will come back someday. But we're seeing changes here due to climate that are going to be very significant. And Mount Charleston's been isolated for a long time. People refer to it as a sky island because it's island that sticks up in the sky here, we say. But that's kind of a misnomer in my opinion, because all islands sort of stick up in the sky, no matter where they are. But it's a real biological island. There are approximately between 20 and 30 endemic species of organisms on Mount Charleston. Plants, insects, mammals, some reptiles, which is comparable to the number of endemics in Ash Meadows, which is considered to be one of the highest concentrations of endemic organisms any place in the United States. And just to be clear, endemics means those organisms or that organism doesn't exist anyplace else. It's just confined to this particular place or area. And so we have a lot of those. We have a lot of plants up there. Clokey's thistle, for instance. People go up there and they see thistles and they think, oh, these are just like all the other thistles we have. No, they're not. They're unique. They only exist in the Spring Mountains. And there's a lot of other organisms like that.
What's different about the Spring Mountains versus the Sierras or the Rockies or the Appalachians or the Blue Ridge Mountains?
So what's different about it is the separation distance from other like areas, if you will. So if you have the Sierras, for instance, are a very big area, hundreds of miles long, 100 miles wide. And so if organisms, well, there's a big range of organisms spread out over hundreds of miles. They're not isolated. The population interbreeds over time for big areas, and so you don't get isolation. And what causes evolution and a change or creation of a unique species is physical isolation so that you cut off the gene flow. Mm-hmm. And that's really why we have endemics in places like Mount Charleston, in places like Ash Meadows, other areas where there's no other supply of genes from those plants or animals anywhere near to interbreed and have a common widespread gene pool.
Yeah, if you've been out to Ash Meadows, 10,000 years ago it was much wetter. All the springs were interconnected, so all the pupfish were all freely hanging out and breeding with each other. But as climate and the temperatures warmed, there was less precipitation, and so the springs became isolated. And so the populations of the pupfish would interbreed and become endemic to that one particular spring. For instance, like the Devil's Hole pupfish. It doesn't exist anywhere else. So that's what an endemic, as John said, that's what an endemic species is. And that's how it happens, because of isolation. And that's what we have in the Spring Mountains.
Yes.
That can bring it into the 22nd century. I hear Mountain West talking a lot about the water, and we hear a lot of other communities talking about the AI servers, or the servers that are coming into communities. And, you know, it's funny, I listen to NPR all the time, so somebody correct me if I haven't heard that report about how it's affecting the valley here. But I drive by those servers, and I know it's a big economic boom that we think we're going to be able to survive economically because of the server farms. So where is the water? And a lot of communities are talking about this, and if I've missed this, somebody tell me. But what is Clark County and the Valley and the community doing about how long will Mount Charleston and the Springs and all of these be able to manage not only what we need as people and biodiversity, but what these firms are going to need in order to do all those servers?
So one thing that the Southern Nevada Water Authority has done about a year or 2 years ago is they passed a new rule prohibiting large facilities, commercial facilities, from using evaporative cooling. No more evaporative cooling for hotels and whatnot. That is a huge deal. That is the second most important use of water in the valley after watering lawns and trees and all that is evaporative cooling. And so from now on, no more big evaporative coolers at commercial facilities. And that certainly includes server farms.
Right, do they have other options, or are we just not going after that business anymore?
Well, their option is to use refrigeration, which is mechanical, and uses a lot more electricity. But that's the option. And so that server farms kind of get the press recently, but the big users of water really lately have been all of these millions of square feet of warehouse space, because all that was cooled by swamp coolers because it's cheap. And what impact that will have on new warehouse construction, I don't know. There's other reasons for not building more warehouses, like we don't need any more. But
We become a storage unit to the world. A lot of land. It's
Well-
in Las Vegas, Los Angeles. So they sold a lot of blank space to a lot of people who fly it into Las Vegas and park it out in the desert. It's cheap.
well, it's yet to be decided what's going to happen with all that space, and I don't know, but we're going to find out. But yes, the Water Authority is very much aware that evaporative cooling is a huge water use, and it's one that could be controlled, actually, not retroactively, but moving forward, no more commercial water swamp coolers. So that means that there will not be a lot of incentive for people to build server farms here that use water. So to give you an example, some of those people are looking at places where they don't have as much need for cooling. So Meta, Facebook company, they've built a server farm in northern Sweden where, you know, it's below zero a fair portion of the year. It's very cold, and they can just use the outdoor air for cooling. And it's cost a lot of money to build something out in northern Sweden. So that tells you something about how much it costs to cool those things.
And how much money they have.
Yeah.
So how they cooling those gas turbines out, all the gas power plants that are up in Clark County right here.
So if it's a gas turbine, there isn't any cooling.
Why they got the big water tanks there then?
Okay, so wait a minute. If it's a gas turbine, the gas basically goes through the turbine and it comes out the other end, and basically it's much cooler because the heat got absorbed and used to turn the turbine. The water you're talking about, the gas-fired power plants that are using steam to generate, so they have a steam turbine, not a gas turbine. They're different. And so if a steam turbine, they basically condense it. And if you go out to Apex and you see those huge big structures out there, those are essentially air cooling.
Ovens, that's Egyptian, right there at Georgia Pacific, and then you have the Apex Lime Place. They all run water.
So the Georgia Pacific thing does not, they're using waste heat from that unit right next to
Yeah,
them
the
to
steam.
heat stuff up. But if you go up Highway 93, there are 3 big steam-powered power plants, as you can see there, and they all have these huge air-cooled systems to basically condense their water, their steam back down to water, because they're not able to use evaporative cooling. So they are able to recycle most of their water, almost
So
all
they
of it.
just
They
recycle.
reuse it. And the price they pay is having that huge unit and all the fans.
So
to-
that's why
to-
Las Vegas is running the big water line out to there then, so.
So we're running a big water line out there so that they can build more of whatever. And one of the conditions of that water line was that they build a sewer line coming back so that all the water that's used for sewage and for uses that are non-consumptive, it can all come back and go into the Colorado River, and we get return flow credits for that. Without return flow credits, we'd be out of
Being
business
cleaned up
here.
beforehand.
Pardon?
Being cleaned up beforehand.
I was just gonna say, are we dumping all that gray water into the Colorado River?
So we
not.
treat that to what's to a certain level of purity before it goes into the river. The people in Bullhead City, one of the commissioners there was astounded and very unhappy when he realized that Las Vegas actually put their wastewater back into Lake Mead. And he said, "You mean we're drinking that stuff?" And the answer was yes. But if you think about other parts of the country, think about the water they get in New Orleans, which has been used in all of the cities in the Mississippi, the Missouri, and the Ohio rivers.
Yeah, water recycling is a big deal and it's starting to become bigger all over the country and all over the world.
Conversion,
Pardon?
septic tank conversion.
Okay, well, we just brought up a separate issue here that we should not be contaminating our groundwater with septic tanks, but that's a different species. So I talked, yes, question?
I was going to ask, you said that watering lawns and irrigation was number 1, evaporative cooling was number 2 usage. How much of that, of the water usage in the valley is just for industrial versus private use? Like who's using more, private citizens or commercial and industrial?
I'm not sure I can answer that question very accurately, but if you look at well, let's just talk about outside irrigation for plants, grasses and trees. Most of that is not commercial. Most of that is homeowners. So that's private use, if you will. The evaporative cooling part is almost all commercial. And it's my impression that the watering, the irrigation is the majority of that. And that's why there's a huge push on the part of the Water Authority to curb outdoor irrigation. At the same time, we're pushing planting more trees. So it's not quite clear how we're going to deal with this conundrum of we want to irrigate less but plant more. And yes, trees use a lot less water than grass, but a big tree uses more water than a little tree, and only big trees make shade. So, yeah, it's a conundrum. And as Winston Churchill once said, you can always count on Americans to do the right thing, but only after they've exhausted all other alternatives. And so we're in the process of running through those alternatives.
Are there some trees that are better than others?
Yes, there are some trees that are better than others. So in general, trees which have really fine leaves, like mesquite, they work better than trees that have big leaves, like say sycamores or fruitless mulberry.
Cottonwood.
Or cottonwoods. They're sort of in between. But yes, desert adapted trees do better, but the bigger the tree, the more water it uses. There's no escaping that, because the trees have to remain cool. They have to get rid of water through their leaves so that leaves don't literally cook. And so one of the things that happens when it gets to 120 here, which doesn't do very often, but it does, is that the trees with the big leaves don't make it. They cook. Pardon?
Is that also evaporative cooling?
It is, exactly. It is exactly evaporative cooling. And you can tell which trees are being stressed by the edges of the leaves start to turn brown. And that happens even with trees that have fine leaves. If you look at the tip of the leaf, you'll see it's turning brown after it's really been stressed when it's super hot.
Is there a comeback for those trees? I mean, can they?
There's a question over here.
Is there a comeback for those trees? Like, not the big ones you're talking about, the other ones that if they start getting brown, can they regenerate themselves?
So they can't fix that leaf, if you will.
Right.
That's permanent, but they can grow new leaves and come back. But one of the things that happens when you really stress those plants is then they become more susceptible to insect damage and disease. And that's really happening here now with pine trees. There's a pine borer that's been introduced into the valley, and when the trees aren't getting enough water, then you start to see single branches go dead, and then the whole tree dies.
We need
so
that
we're
master
gonna-
gardener guy.
So we're going to lose most of the pine trees in this valley over the next 10 or 20 years. Yes.
We have a question from our Zoom audience. We want to know, how can visitors be less disrespectful, and what are the recommendations for responsible visits to Mount Charleston?
Can you repeat that question? I'm not sure I got all of it.
Excuse me. How can visitors be less disrespectful, and what are the recommendations for responsible visits to Mount Charleston?
So the first thing that visitors, and that includes all of us, everybody, can do is not throw out trash, be respectful, leave no trace. In other words, just, you can come, you're welcome, look, walk around, hike, do whatever, but don't leave your trash and don't damage things.
Is there anything else that we can be aware of for the sacred space? And
Myself, I just say respect the land. I mean, you know, we, BLM and Forest Service and whoever else is in charge of those places, they can't monitor everybody, but ourselves as keepers of this land, we should be doing the same thing for everybody, you know, to help clean up all the stuff. If you go to Mount Charleston, you go to Lee Canyon up to that first little turnout right there, if you go in that place, it's a mess. But, you know, all these places, but if you go farther up, it gets a little bit better, you know, but all the lower places where people camp or people do their little picnics or whatever, those places are, you know, just littered. But that's because they don't take out, they bring it in, but they try to dig a hole to bury it, but they're not doing a very good job.
And the Boy Scout rule, you leave it cleaner than you found it.
Yep.
So there's another thing that people need to be aware of, and one of the places where this is really evident is Sloan Canyon, which is one of the sacred sites that he referred to. There's something like 1,800 petroglyphs in Sloan Canyon, and they're up on the rocks that are up on the walls or the slopes of the canyon. And so people say, oh, you know, I want to see it, so they climb up there, basically pushing rocks downhill and disturbing the entire system as they do it. And so and part of being respectful is don't damage the stuff you want to look at, and don't damage the area around it as you want to get closer to either take a better picture or just see it, or horrible, touch it. Do not touch petroglyphs, because the oil on your hands will change the way that rock looks over time. So petroglyphs some of those have been here thousands of years, and some of them much more recently, and you can actually kind of tell the difference because the pictures are different and they look different, but don't touch and don't disturb the area around them. Those are really the church of the native people, if you will. Don't desecrate those things the same way you wouldn't desecrate the inside of one of our churches. You know, so that's the way to be respectful, is just don't touch it, don't screw it up.
How we believe out there in our land, our people is like arrowheads or shafts or whatever. We never pick those up. We never pick them up. We never do anything. And the ones if we do, we move it away so it's not on a trail, but we move those like that. Is because you don't know what's on that, what that was used for. In our people, we believe that the medicines could be good medicine or bad medicine, and so you're touching something that might be a bad medicine, and then you're taking it home to your loved ones. So those are the things that we look at. That's how we see those things. I was always told that as a small kid, is never pick those up, because we used to find them all over. There's places that we find them all over. It's just that we never take them home because we were scolded and said we couldn't do those things. So.
And it's actually illegal to pick up arrowheads and other artifacts. Those are protected by federal law, and you're not to pick those up. And the really sad thing is that when people pick them up, they take them home, they put them in a drawer, all that stuff winds up in the trash eventually. It's gone forever when people pick it up and take it home. And that's a really sad thing. Yes?
Is there any effort of by the hotels to encourage water conservation in their rooms? And
well, so depends on the hotel.
Okay.
Depends on how expensive the room is. We don't like to tell rich people, you shouldn't take a long shower or have a really big shower head that puts out a lot of water. But hotels are all about money. Water costs money. And so, yes, they have low flow fixtures just like everybody else, and it's required by law. So, yes, they do have that. A number of years ago, when I was dealing with the Water Authority, they were telling me, we're seeing this unintentional conservation. That was their word for it, because they were seeing the amount of water per capita, which they keep track of, was actually falling. And what they were unaware of was that plumbing codes had changed nationwide, and new construction, of which we have an awful lot around here, was using lower flow plumbing fixtures. And so people just weren't using as much water to flush toilets and take showers as they had been. And they called it unintentional conservation. But that's important. Fixing it so people can conserve without thinking about it is the best way to have conservation and the most effective.
Yeah.
One of the things to think about with the hotels is that all that gray water and all that black water is cleaned up, remediated, and put back in the Lake Mead. That's why SNWA doesn't, and I'm not speaking for them, that's why they don't really encourage indoor conservation. They capitalize on outdoor conservation with irrigation and replacing turf and all that kind of stuff. I mean, certainly there is a lot of conservation for going in, and that's why they have the tiered stuff. But almost 99% of the water that is used interior to homes and hotels and everything is cleaned up and put back into Lake Mead.
Yeah, but what they're also trying to do is talk to the director of sustainability for one of the large hotels I will not name, this card that says don't use your, you reuse your towel, and it has cut the amount of laundry that they're spending cleaning.
Right, it takes a lot of water to wash towels.
And your sheets every day, and you can request it, but that is another way. So not only is the low flow unintentional, but you can be intentional as a guest. And of course he says, he didn't give me the statistics, but some people are offended. I'm paying you $250 a night, clean my sheets and wash my, towels. So they're trying, but the visiting public is something else. In any hotel around the country,
Yeah.
not just here in Las Vegas.
And around the world too.
Yes, correct.
And sometimes, even when you put the little card out,
Yes.
you'll find your sheets and towels replaced. It's like, I didn't want that. I was specifically trying to save water. So the staff needs to be educated as well.
So Yes.
Haven't there been studies done about getting carried away, taking out all the grass because it's becoming hotter? Like the grass kept things cooler, plants kept things cooler, now we have, we don't have any grass, we have a lot less grass in certain plantings. Is that not making our environment that we live in here much hotter? Thank you.
So what you're talking about here is essentially evaporative cooling via grass. But grass takes a lot of water. So the idea being promoted is we'll take out grass, most of which we don't do anything, don't actually use, we don't walk on it, we don't play on it. And we will use that water to plant or to grow trees, which provide shade. Grass doesn't provide any shade, but it does provide cooling. But if you can provide shade and cool the ground, you will actually improve things. So if you think about planting a tree next to your house, where do you want to plant it? You want to plant it on the west side so that it shades the house. And that will really make a difference in the comfort level in your house and how much air conditioning you have to use. So what we're trying to do, or the Water Authority is trying to do here, is get everybody to kind of abandon grass and plant trees which use less water than grass. One thing I wanted to say, just before that, Las Vegas is unique in that it's the only metropolitan area on the Colorado River that's actually in the basin. The Front Range in Colorado, they're not in a basin. All their water goes to the Gulf of Mexico. Southern California, their water goes to the Pacific Ocean that they take out of the Colorado. And in Arizona, theoretically, it would drain back into Colorado, but it doesn't ever seem to make it that far because they consume almost all of it. So we are able to drain our water directly into the Colorado, and we get credit for all that's measured that goes back. And that was never the intention in 1922 when they set it up. That was just considered irrigation tailwater. You know, you've irrigated, you got some extra water, it goes back in the river, you can get credit for it. But our allocation at full bore is 300,000 acre feet. Right now we're pumping somewhere about 460,000 acre feet. But we're actually only consumptively using about 230 to 240,000 acre feet. So we're using significantly less than our allocation based on how much water goes down Las Vegas Wash and back to Lake Mead. And that's what a lot of people don't realize is that is the saving grace for Las Vegas, is being able to return our gray water back to the lake. That's why we're here.
Everybody else is jealous.
Yeah, we're probably, I've heard it said, the most water secure urban area in the Southwest.
For a couple of reasons. One is that, from the legal standpoint. The other is that the third straw that the Water Authority built into the lake sits below what would be called the dead pool level, which is a level at which you can't run power through the power plant anymore at Hoover Dam. So even after no water is going downstream from Hoover Dam, we could still take water out.
That'll be okay, Arizona and California.
So that does a couple of things. One, it guarantees we have water, but more than that, it means that Arizona and California can't just say, too bad, Nevada. They can't escape that. So politically, that's pretty important.
Politically, they're saying, so that you don't know. That's what they're saying. They're not being honest with what they're saying. They say, I've been on the lake for, I don't know, I go out to the lake all the time, go fishing, right? I get out at Echo Bay. I get on a boat, go out. I was like, I've never seen that island before. But then you hear on the news, the lake's rising. It came up 4 or 5 feet, you know what I mean? And I said, well, how come they're moving the dock back out? So, those are the things I noticed in over the years. I've been going, like 2 years I've been going out to the lake. I mean, it seems like it's going lower. They always say it's coming up, but I never see that. If you go down, like I said, you should be able to go to Overton Beach, but you can't even go to Overton Beach. You can go down there, they got a gate over there. Can't even go over there. So the Muddy River and the Virgin River are feeding Lake Mead. And the water where, so I think it's Stewart's Point. Stewart's Point is probably at 5 feet.
So we're
North of South Feet. I think the people are just saying what they're saying, but they're not being honest with all the people. That's how I look at it. That's my own personal thought, because we have all these engineers, scientists, and all these people doing all these models and everything. But what's the real thing?
So public relations people are really good at talking up the good news and ignoring the bad news. So when the lake comes up 3 feet, we talk about it. When it goes down 20 feet, we don't talk about it.
Yeah.
And
that's what I'm trying to say.
that's what you're talking about there. Yes, sir.
How can the current pace of growth be sustained? I mean, you look at the houses that are going in along Kyle Canyon Road, that must be a long way to pump water from Lake Mead to. And how far can they continue to build? I mean,
Well, it's a very good question, and one that builders would just as soon not answer. But we will find out at some point in time. I once talked to John Ensminger, the head of the Water Authority, and I said, we really need a different system of rates here, depending upon your elevation above town. So if you're living in Summerlin at over 3,000 feet elevation, or 3,500 feet, some places, your water rate is the same as those people living in downtown Las Vegas, even though the cost to pump water up there is almost twice as much as it is downtown, because all the cost is associated with elevation. And what he said is, well, those people use more water and they're paying a lot more because of the tiered thing, because their usage is more, they're paying more. I was like, well, that's a totally separate issue than what it just costs to service them, basically. So yeah, we should be having, the rate should be a function of where you live elevation-wise and what it actually costs to provide the water to you. But
there has to be some authority that's granting them all the building permits.
It's not SNWA.
So that is,
there's a disconnect. As we were talking earlier, SNWA and the Water District are utilities. They're not in charge of the county commissioners, or the county are the ones that are given, and the city giving permits for building. And you're correct, is that eventually we're going to have to pay the piper, because this level of growth is not sustainable.
But SNWA, the county commission are the same. The board is the same. The county commission is the board for this.
not exactly. The board, SNWA board also includes Henderson, Boulder City, City of Las Vegas, City of North Las Vegas. So there is a county commissioner on it, but it's not literally the same board. But to your question, what everybody has is plausible deniability. In other words, the Water Authority people say, hey, we're a utility. We can't tell the county what subdivisions they can approve and whatnot. And if you go to the county commissioners, they say, hey, the Water Authority hasn't told us that we're out of water. So we really can't say to these people, you can't build. So everybody's saying, look at that guy over there. He didn't do anything. So everybody is able to say, not my fault.
So what do projection models show, say in 20 years? Am I going to be able to turn my tap on and see water come out?
So the Water Authority certainly is concerned with this issue. And if you look at their long-term plans, they basically are planning to, by dint of conservation, reduce the per capita consumption lower and lower. But then if you look at their projections for the number of capita, and you look out the same number of years, we're still using the same amount of water. We haven't saved anything. And one of the things that happens is, as you conserve more and more, you harden demand. In other words, if I have a lot of water, I'm wasting a bunch of it. But if you tell me you only get 100 gallons a week and you've got to really conserve, then I need every bit of that 100 gallons. And so as you conserve, it becomes harder and harder to conserve more. And we're going to find out just how far we can go and how much people are willing to withstand in terms of conservation. Yes, sir.
Actually, you made a point I want to emphasize. The amount of water we use is net water. First of all water on Earth is reuse water.
Correct.
So that
dinosaur piss.
Huh?
We're drinking dinosaur piss.
Exactly. So one of the ideas when people say it's gray or used water, all water is used water.
Correct.
Secondly, when you say conserve, it's conservation of net of return. So that to a certain extent, when people say, how do we conserve water? I keep hearing this implied, it's what we use out of the tap. It's not what we use out of the tap, it's what the net is. Outdoor has no return. Indoor water is high, in the 90s I thought return, whether high 90s or low 90s. And
yeah,
it's all cycled through the plant in East Las Vegas in that water.
Correct.
So I guess one of the things I want to sound I'm not Pollyannish, I'm not in favor of industry, but it's also not all doom and gloom because we have a massive net return. We have a relatively well-designed cleaning process, and you can go hiking in the wash towards Lake Las Vegas, which is part of the water cleaning system. So I'm just suggesting, I'm not disagreeing with you, you're using language that I hear the audience not hearing, which is net use, not gross use. That's why outdoor water use or evaporative cooling is not, it's total net. I mean, it's total.
And that's why we are unique
yes.
on the system, is because we can have net use, whereas people in Los Angeles, they don't have an option.
The last thing about server farms, there is a local startup called TensorWave, which is a AI server system. And there are options besides refrigeration or total evaporation. One is a high return evaporation. And if you raise the price of water for, let's say, server farms, they will in fact use a partial return water. They'll use evaporation in a closed system, so much of the water comes back. They don't evaporate into the atmosphere. They're just cooling towers that are internal. So price does determine how much water we use. It's not like what people do is they seek subsidy. And that's why, in fact, SNWA had to restrict evaporative cooling because not very many people were using return water. An evaporative tower that in fact recaptures because it wasn't economic.
Okay. I'm not quite sure how you can have evaporative cooling without getting rid of that heat someplace. And that has to be to the atmosphere. And so
basically, there is something called recapture where it's an evaporative within a closed system. It allows, you create these funnels, and then the water is not allowed to totally vent into the atmosphere.
Okay.
There is technology that uses that.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Paper plants use that.
Yeah, it's an existing technology, it's just not economic. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So, any other questions about Mount Charleston? Yes.
I just wanted to cheer everybody up and let you know that at Bronze Cafe, we only carry bottled water from outside of Nevada, California. Just say that we're linked to 1P at a time.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question for Greg. Do the Paiute tribe or other tribes have community programs that help teach us how to be better stewards of the land?
Not outside the reservation. The children on the reservation is mostly taught in-house. A lot of the families all talk about all the plants and all the water and how to conserve water. Like we're in the desert, you know, a lot of the dry creek beds is one of the areas that you can get water without having water. I mean, back in the younger days, the small flat rock about the size of a nickel, that's flat. Put that in your mouth, put that under your tongue, and that will give you enough moisture to get where you got to get. And that's how our people traveled across this desert.
You know, it would be great to share that information with the
But that's just where I was taught, and you know what I mean? Those are the things that a lot of our older people are gone to this day. You know, a lot of our stuff is going away, you know, and
You can go to the website, it's New Wool Paiute.
What is it called?
New Wool Paiute, NUWU. It's like the New Wool Cannabis here, newwoolpaiute.com.
Okay.
And it talks about all of the tribes that used to be in all of the states.
yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I've been admiring your vest, sir. It's beautiful, and I wonder if you could tell us the story that the vest shows.
The bighorn sheep is one of our sacred animals also. The bighorn sheep sacrificed his life for our people. In return, we honored the mountain sheep with song and dance. And my wife made this for me. It's beautiful. I got a lot of things on it. All my kids, their names are on the sides. And, all these things mean a lot because she made it. But the mountain sheep is what we really honor. That mountain sheep has a lot of things in it that we use today. But still, like I said, the government took all of our rights, our hunting rights. They took our fishing rights. They took our land. They took all these things. So, you know what I mean? That mountain sheep means so much. I mean, the hooves we use for songs and calling the rain. There's a bone in there that we use. It's a floating bone. Nobody knows about it, but those are the things in the foods that we use to eat. You know, those things, that mountain sheep means so much to our people. It's almost like Mount Charleston, Gypsum Cave, Pintwater Cave, all these areas, Sunrise Mountain, all these places mean so much as that mountain sheep, and that's why this fest, it means the world to me. I had a guy, we went to the National Finals Rodeo, and it was a stock contractor, and I wanted to try to remember his name, but he was from South Dakota or wherever. But he came up to me, and we did a tour, our tribe did a tour through the rodeo thing, and he says, "Hey, I got $8,000 here. Can I buy that from you?" I told him no, but I have numerous beading things. My wife, she's a beater. I got more medallions than there is days in a month. I got a lot of things that is beaded because of her and her sisters, my sister-in-laws. They all do beautiful work. So I'm probably spoiled as it is when it comes to our tradition. My wife hand tans, brain tans, deer hides. She scrapes hides, uses porcupine quills. We use all the medicines that are in the desert, all the foods that are in the desert. We try to use them in our home. There's a lot of things we don't do is because, like the turtles, we used to eat the turtles, the tortoises or whatever they want to call it today. You know, we used to eat those, but a lot of this is her design, and my thought is on the mountain sheep. But those are the things I do. So yeah, thank you. Yeah.
One more question back here.
Just a quick question. Mr. Belcher, earlier you mentioned the orograph effect. How do you spell that?
OROGRAPHIC. Orographic. I feel like I'm in a spelling bee. You're welcome.
Okay. Any more questions? Okay, if not, thank you all for coming. I enjoyed it. I think all of us up here did. I hope you did.
I did have a question.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay.
It's probably more California than it is here. Why has California not done two things? One, why have they not captured the water that's coming out and not let it get to the Pacific Ocean? And why have they not explored desalination of some of the Pacific water?
Desal is really expensive.
So your first question was, why aren't they recycling water and capturing it? And the answer is historically they haven't had to. So they didn't. But they are now doing that. In Orange County specifically, there is a treat and put it in the ground. When bacteria in the ground will purify it additionally, and then pump it out. So you put it in the recharge into groundwater here and pump out in a different location. So they're doing that in Orange County experimentally there. That is recycling water. But they just haven't had to in the past, so they didn't.
What's the price?
Costs money.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just mention real quickly, there's one really good book on water recycling by William Alley. He used to be the head of the Office of Groundwater for the U.S. Geological Survey. Really good. But oddly enough, there's like 1 or 2 sentences in there about Las Vegas. So, and I've recently read another book on water recycling, and again, Vegas has half a page. And we should be a star example of that.
What's the name of the book?
I think Bill, the title, it's with him and his wife, who I can't remember her name right now. I think it's called The Recycling Revolution.
And how do you spell his last name?
Alley, A-L-L-E-Y.
Okay.
Spelling bee.
Oh, I am so thrilled, and I want to thank everybody for coming out to this very illuminating conversation. I feel loath to even cut it right now because the issue is so compelling and affects us all. I wanted to thank each one of you. Gregory, thank you for coming out. John, thank you for putting this together. And Wayne, thank you for making it, even though you were in another country like less than 12 hours ago.
Yes.
We appreciate all three of you coming together for this, and more than anything, we appreciate all of you coming out. I want a big, huge thanks to Bronze Cafe. Thank you, David. Please be sure to get over there. Their basil chicken salad is so good. And also, all of you, stay listening to KNPR. Thank you all for your dedication. And remember, pledge drive's coming up. I would like to hear from all of you. If you have any other further questions for John, feel free to email me. My name again is Susan. You can just email susan@knpr.org. I will be happy to forward your questions over to John or to Gregory or to Wayne, and they'll be able to get back to you. But thank you for your interest. Thank you for coming down to Community at Studio One, and I'm hoping to see all of you all again soon. So, thank you.
Thank you.